good to have you back at Mr. Horror Global. Tonight's story comes from a woman whose family, short on money and out of options, took the top floor apartment in a beautiful old building nobody else would rent, and what found her mother there on the very first night. Viewer discretion advised. The top floor apartment. Let me tell you about something that happened to my mother when I was in high school. I was about 17, and we'd already been living abroad for years. My parents had moved the whole family when I was little, and we'd settled into a new country and a new life. So everything I'm about to tell you happened not back home, but in the country we live in now. The thing you have to understand about my mom is that she is the least dramatic person I know. She laughs when something's funny. She gets mad when something's worth getting mad about, but she doesn't really let her emotions show. And she's a devout Christian. She believes in God, but she does not believe in ghosts. She would tell you flat out that the supernatural is nonsense. This is the story that made my mother sob like a child for the first time in my life. When I was a junior in high school, we hit a rough patch financially. Out of nowhere, our landlord told us he was raising the rent by a lot. My parents took one look at the new number and said, "No, we can't do this. We have to move." So we started apartment hunting. My parents wanted somewhere safe and quiet because they had a teenage daughter to think about, and they wanted somewhere cheap because there wasn't a lot of room in the budget. As you can imagine, those two things together are hard to find. They went day after day, walking through one neighborhood after another, and nothing was working. There was another problem too. Out here, a lot of landlords don't like renting to foreigners. So even when my parents found a place that was halfway decent, the landlord would take one look at them and say it was already taken. The move-out date was creeping up. I was in school all day. My dad was at work, so it was mostly my mom doing the looking by herself in the afternoons. One day she'd spent the whole afternoon striking out, and she was just walking back, tired, kind of dragging her feet, and she happened to walk past a building she'd never noticed before. A 7-story apartment building, older but kind of stately, with a little garden out front. She stopped and looked up at it and thought, you know, it'd be nice to live somewhere like this. And as her eyes went up to the top floor, she saw a banner hanging from the railing, for rent, with a phone number. Where we live, the top floors of buildings like that are usually duplexes. 2 stories, lots of rooms, lots of light. So my mom assumed top floor of a nice building has to be expensive, no way we can afford it. But she figured, well, what's the harm in just looking? So she called the number. The person on the other end picked up and asked where she was. She said, "I'm standing right outside the building. I saw the banner." He said, "Oh, hold on a second, I'll come right out." And before she'd even hung up, the door of the building swung open and a man stepped out and waved her over. It turned out he was the landlord, and the unit he was renting was right next door to where he lived. So, for example, if the unit he was renting was 701, he lived in 702. He took her up. Mom said the apartment was incredible. It was on a small hill, so the windows looked out over a wide view. Light pouring in, marble floors. From the outside, the building looked old, but inside the place had been completely renovated. Modern, clean, beautiful. The kind of place you'd see in a magazine. It looked expensive. The neighborhood wasn't exactly wealthy, but it was nice. And a renovated duplex on the top floor. How much would that even cost? But my mom didn't want to look like she'd just come up to gawk, so she asked, kind of carefully, "What's the rent?" And the number he gave was lower than what we'd been paying at our old apartment. Mom got suspicious. The neighborhood is fine. The apartment is beautiful. Why is it so cheap? She asked him directly. Is there something wrong with it? Why is it priced like this? And the landlord laughed, this big easy laugh, and said, why is it weird that I'm asking a fair price? Isn't it good news for the tenant? He had a friendly face. He wasn't treating her like a foreigner. And the apartment was beautiful and cheap. So Mom decided, okay, this is it. She asked if we could move in right away, and he said yes. That evening she brought my dad and me to see it, and we both loved it. So we packed up and moved. The place was huge. 2 regular bedrooms, a master bedroom, a utility room, a terrace, 4 rooms total. I had never lived in a place that big in my life, and I was thrilled. Even though we were abroad, my parents had this old country habit. Whenever they moved somewhere, they would bring little gifts, baked goods or tea or something, around to the neighbors to introduce themselves. Hi, we just moved in, please be nice to us. That kind of thing. The building was 7 stories, so we weren't going to do every floor, but we figured we'd at least do 6 and 7. We started on the 6th floor, knocked on a door. An older woman opened it. She had kind eyes. We introduced ourselves. We just moved in, please look out for us. And she smiled and told us her name was Ruby. I'm changing the names here. Ruby asked which unit we'd moved into. We said 701, and her face shifted just slightly. She said, 701? You sure you don't mean 702? And we said no, 701, the rental unit, right? And she said, oh, so that one finally went. 8 years, huh? We were like, wait, what? 8 years what? That apartment, she said, has been empty for 8 years. The landlord has been struggling with it the whole time. He renovates the whole thing every year and still nobody takes it, and now finally somebody did. And then she looked at us in this strange way and said, well, let's see how long you last. You're foreigners. Maybe you'll be okay. And she took the cookies and closed the door. That was unsettling. Beautiful apartment, 8 years vacant. That doesn't add up. But my mom, and this is exactly the kind of person she is, said, look, we just moved in. I'm not going to start the new place under a cloud. Other people are bad at recognizing a good thing. That's their problem. We got lucky. Let's keep going. We tried a few other doors on the 6th floor and nobody opened up. Then we went to the 7th floor and knocked on 702, the landlord's apartment. A friendly young guy answered, the landlord himself, and behind him, peeking out from behind his leg, was a girl who looked maybe 10 or 11. He pulled her out to introduce her. This is my daughter. The older girl from next door is going to be your neighbor now. Say hi. The little girl was shy and ducked behind him again, and I thought it was cute and tried to say hi. I told her my name, told her I was glad to meet her, said I hoped we'd be friends. She smiled. We went back to our apartment, and my dad said, the landlord is pretty young, isn't he? Probably inherited the building. The one thing in the apartment that was a little weird, structurally, was that the master bedroom had a regular master bath, but right next to that bathroom there was a second tiny bathroom. Just one toilet, nothing else, a little closet of a room. Strange, but whatever. I picked one of the regular bedrooms, dropped my stuff, and my parents poured themselves a drink and toasted to the new place. We thought everything was going to be fine. The first night I had a nightmare. The second night, another one. I can't really tell you what they were about now. It was a long time ago, and they were different every night. But I was waking up screaming, shaking, falling back asleep, waking up screaming again. I couldn't focus at school. I couldn't sleep, so I was exhausted, and my head ached all the time, and I was getting irritable and mean. I moved my bedroom around 5 times in that apartment, trying to figure out which room would let me sleep. I tried my original room. I tried the other guest room. I even dragged a blanket into the utility room and slept on the floor in there. Nothing worked. The nightmares followed me everywhere. One night I'd had another one of those dreams, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I picked up my pillow and walked into my parents' bedroom. I was 17. This is not a normal thing for a 17-year-old to do. But I told them I was scared, that I kept having nightmares, that I didn't want to sleep alone. And my dad said, "Okay, you sleep with your mum, I'll go take your room." That night, sleeping next to my mum, I slept like a stone. From then on, I shared the bed with my mum, and my dad slept in my room. I felt bad for him, but I just couldn't go back. This was around the time my puberty kicked in late, and I was in full rebellious teenager mode, especially with my mom. The big thing we were fighting about was where I was going to go to college. I wanted to go back to my parents' home country. I'd been homesick for years. My mom wanted me to stay in the country we'd immigrated to so I wouldn't be far from them. And going overseas meant I needed to start preparing from junior year, so it wasn't a far-off problem. It was right now. We fought about it constantly. One night we'd been going at it for hours. Eventually my mom said, "That's enough. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm going to bed." She lay down, and I, being a brat, said, "Fine, I'm not going to bed. You sleep, I'm staying up." I sat down at the desk in the master bedroom and turned the computer on. Picture the layout. The bed is on the left side, the desk against the wall on the other side. The little extra bathroom, the closet-sized one, is in the corner to the right of the bed. When I was at the desk with the monitor on, the light fell on my mom's face from a certain angle. My mom told me, "If you're going to be on the computer all night, go to your own room." But I wasn't going to do that, because the whole point was I was too scared to be alone. And honestly, I was tired. I wanted to sleep. I just wanted to be petulant. She told me to go to bed 2 or 3 more times. I ignored her. I sat there scrolling through whatever was popular online at the time. There were these serialized novels I was into. About an hour passed, and from behind me I started to hear something, mumbling. I figured it was my mom nagging at me again, telling me to go to sleep, so I ignored it. But she kept going, so I leaned my ear toward her, just listening, not turning around. And what she was saying was, "I am a good little girl. Get rid of her and live with me instead." The chill that went through me, it wasn't just the words, it was the way she was saying them. She was speaking in the local language, the country's language, not the language we use at home, and not just the local language, but an archaic version of it. Like, imagine if someone you knew, someone who only spoke modern English, suddenly started saying, "Wherefore art thou? And I beseech thee." That kind of old-fashioned. My mom speaks the local language well enough to get by, but she learned it on the fly, by gestures, by necessity. She does not know how to speak in the historical register. That just isn't in her brain. I turned around. My mom was lying there with her eyes shut, peacefully, like she was asleep. The monitor light caught her face just enough that I could see her. I thought, did I imagine that? Did I just hear that? I sat there staring at her, and while I was watching, her eyes still closed, her mouth started moving again. Bad little girls must be punished. I am a good little girl. I shut the computer off as fast as I could. I crawled into bed next to her and curled into her side and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'll go to bed. Please don't do that, you're scaring me." She didn't say anything back. After a while, I fell asleep. In the morning, I asked her about it. "Where did you learn to talk like that? Why would you make that kind of joke? You know I get scared." She kind of smiled, a little embarrassed, and said, "I did? Was I just tired? I don't know what that was." She brushed it off. But after that night, it started happening regularly. My mom would lie there asleep, eyes closed, mouth moving, whispering things in that old-fashioned form of the local language, and the content was always some variation of, "Your daughter is not a good daughter. I would be a better daughter. Your daughter has to go." Sleeping alone in my room was terrifying. Sleeping next to my mom was terrifying. I was losing my mind, and meanwhile my mom was clearly not sleeping either. Her dark circles got worse and worse. She started having episodes during the day where she'd be out doing errands and just collapse from exhaustion. She'd end up in a clinic, getting fluids, sleeping for an hour, going home. That was how she was getting any rest at all. And we were fighting more than ever about college. Real screaming fights now. My dad just stood in the middle, lost. The whole apartment felt sick. But even with everything, I would rather sleep in that bed next to my mom than sleep alone, even with the whispering. So one night, after another huge fight, we both crashed into bed exhausted. I don't know what time it was. 2, 3 in the morning maybe. My mom started screaming. I jolted awake and flipped the light on. Her eyes were still closed, but tears were pouring out the corners, and her fingers and toes were twisting, curling in these awful, unnatural shapes, like she was being twisted by something. And she was screaming. My dad came running. We tried to wake her up. We shook her, we pinched her. She wouldn't wake. Finally, my dad ran to the kitchen, brought a cup of cold water, and threw it on her face. She bolted upright, and the first thing she did was reach for me. She grabbed my face, ran her hands over my cheeks and my shoulders, like she was checking that I was real, that I wasn't injured. Then she pried my mouth open and stuck her fingers inside, feeling around, like she was looking for something. Then she sat back, and she started to sob. I had never seen my mother cry like that. Not once in 17 years. I started crying too, just from the sight of it. My dad kept asking, "What is it? Did you have a dream? What happened? What happened?" She couldn't get the words out. She just kept saying, "I thought our daughter was gone. I thought she was going to be hurt. I was so scared." It took a long time to calm her down. When she could finally talk, what she told us was something I have never been able to make sense of. She said it had started right after I'd started sleeping in her bed. That very first night, the night I'd been at the computer being a brat, my mom had fallen asleep, and then she'd had what she described as a dream, but a strange one. Her viewpoint went up, like a security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling, looking down at the whole bedroom. She couldn't move, couldn't open her eyes, couldn't speak, but she could see. And from the little bathroom in the corner, that strange tiny bathroom with only the toilet, something white came crawling out. On its belly, along the floor, white and crumpled, it crawled out across the floor and up onto the bed, and it knelt down next to my mom's body, like in prayer. When she got a closer look, she saw the white was the color of the clothing. It looked like a hospital gown, like patient clothing. The figure was an adult woman, but she was wearing children's clothes, and the children's clothes were too small. The arms cuffed tight, the legs cuffed tight, the body all pinched in. The face was hard to see, but the woman had filthy long fingernails, pointed and sharp. The woman looked at my mom, then she looked at me, sleeping next to her, then back at my mom, and she pointed at me and said, in that archaic version of the local language, "Is that your daughter, madam?" And then, "Bad little girls must be punished. I am a good little girl. Get rid of her and live with me instead." My mum has lived her whole life without anything supernatural happening to her. She just doesn't have a framework for that. She was paralyzed and panicked, and she didn't know what to do. She couldn't speak, so she prayed silently. She prayed, "I don't need you, my daughter is enough. God protect us, send this evil away." And the woman, my mom said this slowly, like she was still seeing it. The woman tilted her head sideways, very mechanically, 90 degrees, like a clock hand clicking over, and she said, "That isn't the answer I wanted. Shall we try again?" And then she reached over, took the thumbnail off her own hand, just ripped it off, and pushed the point of it down into the bed of my mom's thumbnail, between the nail and the skin. And she kept whispering, "I am a good little girl. Get rid of her and live with me instead." My mom's thumbnail couldn't take the pressure. It popped off and fell onto the bed. The woman picked it up and put it in the pocket of her gown. My mom said she felt every bit of the pain, 100%. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. And every time the woman said her lines, my mom's mouth, the body of my mom that she was watching from above, would also mouth the same words. That was the muttering I'd been hearing from the desk. After that first night, this happened every night. The woman would crawl out of the little bathroom, climb onto the bed, and now, once I was in the bed too, she would kneel over my face, right over my face, and whisper to my mom, "Live with me instead, make me your daughter." And my mom would pray, "Please God, my only daughter is the one I already have. Save us, save us." And every night, the woman would tilt her head sideways with that clicking motion and say, "That isn't the answer I wanted," and rip off one of her own nails and push it into one of my mom's nails, and one of my mom's nails would pop off and fall onto the bed, and the woman would put it in her pocket. You know how many nights my mother endured this, all 10 fingernails and 9 toenails. She held that secret for that long. I asked her why she didn't tell us. She said she didn't tell us because she didn't believe it. She kept telling herself it was a dream. It was stress. She was overtired. She was making it up to herself. She didn't want to admit, even to herself, that it was real. But the night she screamed, that night she said she'd known something was about to happen. She only had 1 toenail left, the little toe on her foot. She had this terrible feeling that when that last one came off, something worse would happen. And then there we were, screaming at each other about college, until we both collapsed into bed exhausted, and she fell asleep. The viewpoint floated up. The woman crawled out of the little bathroom, knelt over my face, whispered, "My mom prayed." The head clicked sideways. That isn't the answer I wanted. And the last toenail came off. The woman picked it up off the sheet and put it in her hand. With her other hand, she reached into the pocket of her gown and pulled out all the others, all 19 of them that she'd been collecting. And then she opened her mouth, and my mum said her mouth split open all the way back to her ears, and she dumped every one of them in, and she started to chew, crunching and chewing greedily. My mom couldn't even react. She just watched. Then the woman stood up on the bed, repositioned, and knelt down again, this time directly over my mom's face, looking down at me, and she reached down with her hands and pried open my mouth, my sleeping mouth, and she bent her head down with all those crushed pieces of nail in her own mouth, like she was about to pour them into me. My mom said she tried with everything she had to scream, to move, to wake me up, to do anything. She couldn't. Her body wouldn't respond. That was when my dad threw the cold water on her face. When she sat up, the first thing she did was reach for me and check my face and open my mouth and check inside. That was the dream. My dad and I sat there listening, and we couldn't process it. It was like something out of a horror movie, but worse, because we knew my mom. She doesn't make things up. She doesn't joke about things like this. And she was sobbing the whole time she told us. We just had to accept that this had happened to her. That night, we all dragged our blankets out to the living room and slept there together. My dad and I barely slept. We kept looking at my mom to make sure she was breathing, but she, with us watching her, slept like she'd been knocked out, just collapsed into it. We hadn't even been in that apartment a full month, and we already knew we were leaving. But before we did, my mom needed to know what had happened to her, and that's where the rest of the story came from. For a few days after she told us about the dream, none of us said another word about it, like we'd silently agreed, just acted normal, slept in the living room, ate dinner, pretended. Then one afternoon I came home from school and my mom was in the kitchen baking cookies, a pound cake, the whole spread. I said, "What's all this?" And she said, "You and I are going somewhere." She loaded up a tray of baked goods and I followed her. We went down to the 6th floor and knocked on Ruby's door. Ruby opened the door, took one look at us and said, "You're still here? That's impressive." My mom held up the tray and said, "Ma'am, I made some things for you. If you have a few minutes, I'd really like to talk to you." Ruby looked at her for a second, like she'd been expecting this, and said, "Come in." We sat in her living room. She made tea. We had the cookies and the cake. And then my mom, and you have to understand, my mom is not someone who beats around the bush. My mom said, "When we first moved in, you said, 'Let's see how long they last.' What did you mean by that?" Ruby sighed. She said, "I wasn't going to tell you this. I never tell anyone. But you came around on day one with cookies and an introduction, and no tenant has done that in years, and you seem like decent people. So I'll tell you, believe it or don't, that's up to you." Then she told us, "The apartment we'd moved into is cursed. The whole building is known for it. People around the neighborhood whisper about it. The family that built the building is the family that lives in 702, the landlord and his daughter. They aren't just the landlords of our unit. They own the entire building, and generations ago, they were extremely wealthy. They ran a large distillery, and they had old money behind them. But each generation lost more of the fortune, until by the time of the current owner's great-grandfather, all that was left of the family wealth was this single apartment building and a small struggling distillery. I'm going to call this great-grandfather Howard. The original storyteller used a placeholder name too. We never learned his real one. Howard was bitter about how much his family had lost. 100 years before him, they had been rich and important, and what he had now was one building and a tiny factory. He felt cheated. He got married, but he and his wife couldn't have children. He didn't particularly care about carrying on the family line, but his wife desperately wanted a baby. So they adopted. They brought home a little girl. This was during a time when the world was unsettled, wars and the aftermath of wars, and adoption was easy. Paperwork was loose. They just took her. At first they treated her well, fed her, clothed her, called her their daughter, but after a year or two, the wife got pregnant, and then she got pregnant again, and again. 5 children in a row, 2 girls, 3 boys. And once the biological children started coming, the adopted girl became inconvenient. The family's finances were bad, the household was growing, they couldn't afford a maid, And here was this child they had taken in who wasn't really theirs in their minds and who was an extra mouth to feed, so they started using her as a servant. She was just a little girl. She didn't know how to do housework, but Howard's wife told her, "You are a bad girl. We took you in and we feed you and house you, and if you don't do what we tell you, we'll throw you back out." And then she would punish her, beat her, and whenever the child made a mistake, Howard would lock her in that little bathroom, that tiny closet of a bathroom in the master bedroom, and make her stand against the wall all night. He told her, "This is where you belong. You are a bad girl who belongs in a bathroom." I'm not going to go into the rest of it. You can imagine. The child's life in that house was a nightmare. And one morning, they opened the door of the little bathroom, and she was dead. Ruby didn't know the exact circumstances, just that the girl died, alone, locked in that bathroom, at some point during the night. And after that, the family was cursed. Howard's wife began to lose her mind, slowly, then quickly. Eventually, she killed herself in the same little bathroom where the girl had died. The 5 biological children all started getting sick, or losing their minds, or developing strange ailments. Nothing was right with any of them. Howard looked at the pattern and put it together. He decided the apartment was the problem. The girl had died in that apartment, and her presence was destroying his family. So he moved them out, moved to another part of the country, started over. The new house caught fire. The next one caught fire. They lost 2 of his daughters to one of those fires. Only the 3 sons were left. He moved over and over. Eventually his money ran out because moving costs money, and he didn't have any income besides the rent on the original building, so he tried to sell the building outright. He listed it, and from the moment he listed it until today, no one has ever made an offer to buy it. Not once. It's a perfectly nice building in a perfectly fine neighborhood. Nobody will touch it. He had no choice. He moved back, but not into 701. He couldn't bear that. He tried the 1st floor, fires, 3rd floor, fires, 5th floor, fires. Finally, he tried 702, the unit right next door to 701, and the fires stopped. But anytime he or his family went out of town, vacation, business, anything that pulled them away from this building for any length of time, something would happen. A fire somewhere, an accident, a death. The family couldn't leave. Now Howard was an adult, and he did the thing to that girl. So you can say he earned what was happening to him. But his 3 remaining sons, what did they do? They were children. They'd lost their sisters and their mother, and now they were trapped. Howard, in his way, was still a father. He felt for his sons. He wanted to break the curse. In this country, there are people who practice the old folk traditions, a kind of shamanism. They go by different names. People who claim to see spirits, fortune tellers, that kind of thing. Howard hired one, a well-known one, brought her up to 701 and asked her to investigate. She walked in, looked around, and said she'd need to stay a few days to see what was really going on. He let her sleep there. The next morning she came to him and said, "Who is the girl who died in this apartment? She wasn't your daughter, was she? How did she die?" Howard, who was not going to admit what he'd done, said the family had adopted a little girl many years ago and she had gotten sick and died. That was all. The shaman looked at him and said, "That's a lie. That girl wasn't supposed to die at that age. I don't know who did it, but someone in your family destroyed her fate. Last night in that apartment, I saw a pitiful little girl crouched in the corner of the bathroom, desperate to be acknowledged as part of the family. She was terrible to look at. Normally, a spirit appears the way the person did at death, but this one has so much will, so much rage, that she's growing, she's getting larger, and eventually she will come for you. But, the shaman said, the dead are the dead, and the living are the living. I'll tell you how to live with this. You take a family into 701, a family with a young daughter. The girl spirit will fixate on that family. She'll be too distracted by them to come after yours. Howard said, look, taking in tenants is easy, but what I really want is to leave, to sell the building, to be done with this place. Every time we move, our house burns down. My wife died in this apartment. 2 of my daughters are gone. Isn't there any way to escape? The shaman stared at him for a long moment, and then she said, you're a living person too, aren't you? I told you how to save yourself, and your only response is to push the danger off onto strangers, onto another family with a little girl. Not one shred of guilt, not one moment of thinking about that child you took in. She kept going. The reason that girl's spirit lodged in that apartment in the first place is because you never once recognized your guilt. You never grieved for her. You never apologized. Your whole bloodline is cursed at the root, and there is no breaking it. Your children and your children's children, on down the line, will all suffer. You thought you could destroy a life and walk away clean. Just pay your price. That's all that's left for you. And she walked out. Years passed. Of Howard's 3 remaining sons, 2 died young, one after the other. Only the eldest was left. Before Howard died, he told that son, leave this family, change your name, don't marry, don't have children, end the curse with you. That is your only way out. The eldest son spent his whole life carrying that. He never left the neighborhood. He couldn't, the way the curse worked. Every time the family strayed too far from the building, something happened, so he just lived in it, rented out the few units that would rent, endured. But against Howard's wishes, the eldest son did eventually fall in love. He did get married, he did have a child, and that child was the father of the man who's now the landlord, the one we met the day we moved in. Ruby, the old woman we were talking to, said she started renting in the building when the current landlord's father was still alive. She knew the father very well. He had been an exceptionally kind man. He rented to her at a very low price because he knew she was struggling, and when she couldn't afford food, he would empty his own refrigerator and bring it to her and say, anytime you're hungry, you tell me. She called him her benefactor. He had been an angel to her. She'd noticed odd things over the years. The little garden out front. Nothing would grow in it. You'd plant flowers, and they'd never bloom. They'd just rot, roots and all. And though the building was supposedly full of tenants, 4 units a floor, 7 floors, she'd lived there for years and almost never seen another neighbor coming or going. But mostly what she'd seen was tenants fleeing 701. Family after family, sometimes a big family with multiple children, sometimes a single mother and a daughter. The landlord's father would renovate the unit every single year, change the layout, change the look, and tenants would still flee within a week of moving in. He kept dropping the rent. It didn't matter. Some held out longer. Tenants without children, tenants who weren't really a family at all. Those could sometimes last a year or 2. But anyone with a young daughter, the mothers couldn't handle it. They always left first. Eventually the landlord's father, the kind one, Ruby's benefactor, got sick. Slowly then quickly. And one day he came down to Ruby's apartment and sat with her and told her for the first time the whole history of the curse. Everything his father, the eldest son, had passed down to him. Everything that started with Howard. Ruby was floored. She had no idea he'd been living under that. She asked, "Why are you telling me this? Why now?" He said, "Because in all my life, you are the person who has stayed by me the longest. My wife is gone. My friends left. Even the workers from the distillery left. You are the longest standing tenant in my building, and you are precious to me. I want to ask you a favor. Everyone in our family dies young," he said. "That's part of the curse. I don't have much time. I have a son. When I'm gone, will you watch over him? You won't have to pay rent. Just stay in the building. Be near him. He knows the rules. I've made sure he knows what his great-great-grandfather did and what the rules of this curse are. But he'll still suffer. I just want someone watching him. If he's struggling, give him a kind word. That's all I'm asking." He died not long after, and his son, the man we'd met, became the new landlord and inherited the curse. The new landlord, the one we met, had also married young, but his wife couldn't take the building. She insisted they move. They moved 3 times. On the 3rd move, the house caught fire, and she lost one of her eyes, and after that she walked out. She left him and the daughter behind. So he was raising this daughter alone in 702, and the daughter, the shy little girl, who hid behind his leg the day we moved in. Ruby said she was the strangest thing. She was well over 10 years old, but she was tiny and gaunt. She saw things that weren't there. She didn't leave the apartment. I translated for my mom as Ruby was telling all of this, because some of it was in vocabulary my mom didn't know. And I have to tell you, even sitting there listening to all of it, I didn't really believe it. I was 17. Curses, bloodlines, generations of suffering. It sounded like a movie. I sort of nodded along, but in my head I was thinking, sure. My mum listened in total silence. She didn't react. She just nodded slowly the whole time. And when Ruby was finished, she told us, "This building has a reputation in the area. You can ask anyone. It's known. Get out before it kills you. Get out now." We moved within the month. We'd barely finished unpacking before we packed everything back up and dragged it to a new place. My parents never confronted the landlord, never said, "Why didn't you warn us?" And the landlord on his end never tried to hold us to a lease. He just let us go. It was the easiest move we'd ever done. After that, my family never talked about it. Like a rule we never agreed on, but everyone followed. The apartment, the dream, the little girl in the gown, never mentioned again until I started preparing to tell this story. I don't think I'd said any of this out loud to anyone. I don't know if my mom believed everything Ruby told us. I didn't at the time. The dream happened, I know that. But whether some dead girl from 100 years ago was really tormenting her, whether the woman in the gown my mom saw was a real person who once existed, I can't say. There's no way to know. On the other hand, Ruby's story was awfully detailed for something just made up. What I do know is that the dream changed my mom. Some kind of trauma got into her. She has refused ever since to live in any apartment where the master bedroom has its own attached bathroom, and she won't sleep next to me alone, just the 2 of us in a bed. She'll find a reason not to. Here's the part that made me decide to finally tell the story. I went to college, and after college, I got married, right out of school. The first place my husband and I rented together, our first place as a married couple, was in that same neighborhood. I've been living there for 6 years now. If you walk out our back door and go down 2 alleys, you come out in front of the building. The cursed building. Top floor still has the same view. When my husband and I were apartment hunting, my mom came with us. None of us realized where we were. By the time I figured it out, we'd already moved in. A few days after the move, my husband and I were taking a walk and I saw a building that looked familiar, and I turned the corner and there it was, the same little garden in front, where nothing has ever grown. I tried recently to ask my mom about the details of that night for this story. She knows it best. It happened to her. As soon as I started to bring it up, she said, "What are you doing? Stop. Don't talk about that." So I dropped it. Everything I just told you is from my own memory. There might be little gaps. There might be small things I'm getting wrong, but the shape of it is exactly the way it happened. I still think about that little girl sometimes, locked in the dark in a closet of a bathroom, told she was bad, told she belonged in there. Whatever she became after she died, whether she's still in that apartment or whether she ever existed at all, I think about her. The shaman said it. The reason she stayed was that nobody ever once said they were sorry. Nobody grieved her. She just wanted to be a daughter. That, in the end, is the part that haunts me. Not the nails, not the gown. That